Welcome to Next Man Up, proactive DFS strategies based on inactive NFL players. I'm Mike Davis, the Q&A columnist at FF Today. Matthew Schiff, my customary partner in crime, will be unable to join me for today's broadcast, but he emailed me some thoughts that I'll share during the show. In last week's installment of Next Man Up, I recommended Derek Carr at QB, Thomas Rawls at RB, Tyler Boyd at wide receiver, and Tyler Eifert at tight end. Carr justified his price tag with 315 yards, 2 TDs, and a 2-point conversion. Rawls, as part of a dismal showing by the entire Seattle offense, was a bust with just 38 rushing yards. Boyd delivered 62 yards on 5 receptions, so he wasn't terrible for a cheap wideout, but he probably hurt more lineups than he helped. Eifert had a few more yards, 68, on the same number of catches, but his TD made him a worthy start at tight end. Despite that mixed bag of results, 2 of the 4 tickets I reviewed last week finished in the money. As always, I'll try to do better with this week's featured players. And here's a reminder of the 3 self-evident principles underlying the player selection process at Next Man Up. 1, it's better to operate with more information than less, so we go out of our way to let the latest injury news influence our lineups. 2, the backups who fill in for injured stars are often thrust into high-volume situations that aren't reflected in their pricing on DFS sites like DraftKings. And 3, for tournament play, plugging in no-name backups who may come out of nowhere is an easy and effective way to achieve differentiation from the crowd. All right, for my first ticket, let's plunge in. My featured receiver on this ticket is Dontrell Inman of the San Diego Chargers. The logic for this is that Inman's teammate, Tyrell Williams, who has been a featured player on Next Man Up in the past, is nursing a shoulder injury. So this week, I'm betting on Inman to emerge as the top San Diego wideout. You can see that he's a reasonably affordable wideout at $5,200. On all of the tickets this week, I've gone a bit spendy at running back. The 2 priciest running backs in week 13 are David Johnson and Lev Bell, and they're priciest for good reason. They will, in all probability, finish as the 2 most valuable running backs. It's hard to get both of them in because of their price tags. But I was able to work Johnson in with Jordan Howard as my other running back, and he'll be my featured player in my next lineup, so I'll say more about him then. For this ticket, I stacked Inman with Phillip Rivers. That seems intuitive. I've also worked in Tyler Boyd, who may benefit this week from the absence of A.J. Green. He didn't come through in gangbuster fashion last week, but he showed enough promise that I'm willing to roll the dice on him once again. Tyreek Hill at 4,600. I don't understand why DraftKings isn't higher on this guy. I keep plugging him into lineups because he's cheap and he keeps delivering. A lot of the wins that Matthew and I have enjoyed over the past 4 or 5 weeks have been a result of our reliance on Hill. I'm going to continue to use him until I see a good reason not to. Another Kansas City player on this lineup is Travis Kelce at tight end. I had enough money to squeeze in one of the pricier tight ends on this ticket because I saved so much at receiver. And you can see Willie Snead is another of those low 5,000 receivers that makes this ticket possible. So between Inman and Snead as my pricey wideouts, I only spent $10,300 of my budget. Snead should be solid this week against a Detroit team that is better against receiver on the outside than those in the middle. So I'm not as excited about Cooks this week as I am about Snead, and I'm much happier to pick up Snead at a lower price. The Dolphins are fighting for their playoff lives. Their defense has surged, and they're nevertheless very expensive. And so I'm willing to take a chance on the Dolphins versus a Baltimore offense that doesn't have a running game and doesn't have a very terrifying receiver for Flacco to throw to. So that's the explanation of what's going on with this ticket. Let's take a look at my next ticket, which features my running back, Jordan Howard. Howard is poised for a big day against the worst rush defense in the league, the San Francisco 49ers. And he should benefit from injuries on both sides of the ball. because Chicago is hurting at quarterback, Jay Cutler's still out, and so we're still going to have Barkley in, and Barkley did well last week, better than certainly I expected. But this is a backup running back, and I would expect the offense to rely heavily on the running back in a situation like this. And it doesn't hurt Howard's prospects that the San Francisco linebacker core will be missing one linebacker who's just been put on injured reserve and maybe missing another. So we could have who's questionable. So we could have some serious depth problems in San Francisco that Howard can exploit. I took a gamble on Inman being the beneficiary of the injury to Tyrell Williams. On this ticket, I'm taking a stab at Travis Benjamin being the beneficiary, not because I really think that's likely, but because his $4,600 price tag allowed me to do some other things. You can see that I worked Tyreek Hill into this ticket as well, along with Vance McDonald, the San Francisco tight end, who is becoming a larger presence in that San Francisco offense than I think a lot of people are noticing. So just go back and look at his targets over the past few weeks and pay attention to the fact that Kaepernick has emerged not as a good quarterback, but as an elite fantasy quarterback since taking over that job in San Francisco. And you'll understand why I'm willing to gamble on McDonald here. I took Snead from New Orleans against Detroit on the last ticket. In this ticket, I'm taking Tate against New Orleans. I think the Detroit-New Orleans game is likely to be a high-scoring affair. I have gone out of my way to get some involvement in that game in almost all my tickets. And as for the Jacksonville pick, there's a strong possibility that with the sudden replacement of Trevor Siemian by Paxton Lynch at QB for Denver, that the Denver offense could be completely ineffectual. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I think it's a likely enough possibility to make this $2,600 Jacksonville defense playing at home pretty tempting. So that's the justification for my decisions there. Oh, I skipped my quarterback wide receiver stack here, Wilson and Baldwin of Seattle. I know they had a terrible game last week, but Carolina isn't the Carolina they used to be. This will be Wilson and Baldwin's chance to show what they can do against the Panthers when there is no Josh Norman to contend with. And I'm not predicting a bounce back game for Wilson, but I won't be surprised by one. So, and they're cheaper than they usually are because of last week's miserable performance. So I took a gamble on them in this ticket. Now let's look at ticket number 3. And my featured player in this lineup is Paxton Lynch. His replacement of Siemian means that you can get in a quarterback at the bargain basement price of $5,000. I do not think Paxton Lynch will perform well relative to other quarterbacks this week. That's not the point of this. I think he may perform well relative to his price at quarterback. And so by stacking Lynch and Thomas, I'm able to save so much money that I can get away with the really pricey running back tandem of Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. This is the only ticket where I could work both of them in, and that was the reason for going with Lynch. Excuse me, and Demaryius Thomas. I do want to point out that Matthew Schiff wrote me back with an assessment of this ticket and said he doesn't like it. So I'm gonna warn listeners who have learned that Matthew's insights are quite valuable. This is the ticket that he might talk me into doing something else with. He would advocate that it's a better use of funds to go a little cheaper at running back, maybe work in Shady McCoy, maybe someone like Howard. And spend a little more on quarterback. So that's his advice. Nevertheless, since he's not here to talk me out of this one, I'm going to run with this ticket because I did want to have at least one with Bell and Johnson in it. And let me just quickly go over the other ones here. We've talked about Willie Snead already. Sammy Watkins versus Oakland. I know there are a lot of people who are worried that he won't play all the way through the games. I'm one of those people. My experience with Sammy Watkins is every time he goes up for the ball, he comes down with his leg in a splint. So I understand being averse to Watkins, but I think the Buffalo-Oakland game could end up being a high-scoring affair because it's in Oakland, and I think Carr's on a bit of a streak and will continue to perform well. And Tyrod Taylor is always capable of answering the challenge under any circumstances. Buffalo offense is surprisingly resilient. So I wanted to get in on Watkins on at least one ticket. I'm taking the gamble here because he fit my pricing strategy. Okay, moving on to my final ticket. And the featured player here burned me 2 weeks ago. I put Martellus Bennett on at least three of my tickets. I think three of my tickets 2 weeks ago when we learned at the last minute that Gronk would definitely be out. And Bennett seemed like an obvious, easy play. Obviously, he clearly did not deliver on his promise in that situation. I'm going to give him another chance because just last week, the Los Angeles Rams gave up 10 receptions and 133 yards to the Saints tight ends. So if that defense can yield that much yardage to tight ends a week ago, maybe Bennett is worth another gamble this week. And I will say that if Bennett does not take advantage of this opportunity, you need not fear. He will not be a featured tight end of mine again this season, but I am giving him a second chance. You can see that my QB wide receiver stack here is Stafford and Tate. I already explained why I like Tate. Stafford, I think, is probably one of the best quarterback values for his price. The real excitement this week is for Drew Brees, and I understand that against the Detroit defense. But Brees is also the most expensive quarterback. So you can go a lot cheaper at QB, Stafford, and get a QB playing against that Saint defense in a game where the offensive engine will be driven by Brees. So Stafford will be challenged to respond to what Brees can do. And I think that the likelihood of him answering that challenge is strong enough to justify at least one Stafford Tate stack in your tournament tickets this week. Here, I didn't have either Bell or Johnson in at running back. I went a little spendier at the receiver position. So I've relied on Jordan Howard yet again for reasons we've already discussed. And I took a chance on Spencer Ware, which isn't because I'm especially optimistic about his chances this week, but this was a ticket with a limited number of games in it, and Ware was an affordable and promising running back from that limited number of games. I like DeAndre Hopkins as having a breakout opportunity this week. He's been a dud pretty much all season. I certainly don't believe in Brock Osweiler, but the Packers rely so much on their passing game that I think they're going to force the Texans to answer with a passing game of their own. We'll see. Jarvis Landry for Miami is a dodgy play. He certainly hasn't been the Landry in 2016. He hasn't been anything like the Landry of 2015. But again, Miami is trying so hard to into the postseason. And with Devontae Parker hurt, I'm taking a shot on Jarvis Landry this week. Jeremy Curley is a complete long shot, but if I wanted to get these other wideouts in, Hopkins, Landry, and Tate, I already had to conserve money and was buying moderately priced running backs, so I was going to have to make a sacrifice somewhere, and there's no telling who's going to end up as the primary San Francisco receiver, but it's always possible with Kaepernick playing as well as he's been playing that a San Francisco receiver can have a good day. And the price point on Curley makes me take the chance on him this week. As for the Broncos, they are an extremely attractive defense. They're also an expensive defense this week. But the thing about justifying their price is that Jacksonville, although I bet on them to do something well in another ticket, in this ticket, I'm just sort of expecting them to fall apart because that possibility looms large. They're out of postseason contention. They're not any good. They don't do anything well. What if they just check out completely for this game, and the extremely fierce Bronco defense exploits them in all the ways that we know that it can? So that's the gamble on the Bronco defense really emerging as potentially the most valuable defense all week. Okay, so that takes you through the 4 tickets. I'm sorry, guys, that Matthew's not here to sort of nitpick me and challenge me and have me modify these tickets live. We hope to have Matthew back next week. And with all that said, all I can say now is this is Mike Davis signing off for Next Man Up. Thanks, guys.